Hello viewers, welcome to Indian Masterminds. Today we have with us former Foreign Secretary of India, Nirupama Menon Rao. She's just come out with a new book called The Fractured Himalaya, and today we are going to discuss this book with her. Welcome to Indian Masterminds, ma'am. And first of all, congratulations on your new book.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Happy to be here discussing it with you.
Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, tell us, when did you decide to write this book and why?
Well, I started to write this book about 4 years ago. And as you will see from the book, there was a lot of research involved in it. So even some years prior to that, I had started working on collecting all the material I needed for the book. Because it was quite a huge enterprise in many ways, because the period covered is about 12, 13 years, and lots of events happened during that period. History was being made in many ways, and to access the archival material that would help me write the history was also, it was a journey of exploration in many ways. And so it took some time. I started writing the book in 2017. Why did I want to write the book? I wanted to write the book because I felt that our public, particularly a younger generation in India, needs to know more about the subject, because today we have a problem of confrontation and possible very high tensions. More than, I mean, that is not just a possibility, it exists today. We have very high tensions with China along the border that we share. So I know, having been a practitioner, having been in the Foreign Service and having dealt with the subject, I knew that there is a long history to these matters. These things have not happened overnight. And people in India deserve to know more about the subject so that they can understand these problems better, and that so that they can form a better understanding of the difficulties and the differences that we have with China. So that was the purpose of writing the book. And next year, as you know, is the 60th anniversary of the conflict with China. It'll be 60 years since 1962. So I felt this book coming out at this time would also be very relevant and very topical given that anniversary.
Okay. So, ma'am, in chapter 3 of your book, you write in detail about how Tibet was let down in UN by India. You write, Tibet has been effectively abandoned. Its protector deities proving to be of little use. Please elaborate.
Well, in 1950, 1951, when the Chinese People's Liberation Army entered Tibet, the authorities in Lhasa, the Dalai Lama and others in the Kashag, as the governing council in Lhasa was called, they made efforts to approach the United Nations. And at that time, no country in the world, not just India, not the UK, not the United States, members of the Security Council, the UK and the US were, nobody really made a serious effort to support Tibet's case in the United Nations. So in that sense, yes, it was abandoned, because if the case had been discussed at length in the United Nations and the problem flagged even for the future, even if it could not be solved, even if the no power on earth could have prevented the Chinese from entering Tibet at that time. The Korean War had broken out. This was at the height of the Cold War between the Eastern and Western blocs. So any question of countering the Chinese in Tibet would have been next to impossible, let alone for India or any other country. But taking up the case in the UN and elaborating and explaining to world opinion and putting before the global stage that this question of Tibet is not, cannot be automatically an issue of, China just entering Tibet and taking it over. Tibet had enjoyed a de facto independent existence for close to over 5 decades in the early 20th century. And even before that, the Chinese claim on Tibet was rather tenuous. So what the Chinese did was they walked into Tibet and nobody resisted them. And they essentially, the Tibetan order that existed until then disappeared as a result. If we had taken the issue up in the UN and supported the Tibet cause in the UN, at least this problem would have been placed on the agenda of the United Nations. It was not at that time.
Okay, and this particular question that I'm going to ask you now is of a particular, special interest to me because I come from the Northeast. China has built an entire village in Arunachal Pradesh. So what should India do now?
Well, I know that there have been some satellite images which show, a village here or a village there. But you must understand that you in the media cannot jump to some automatic conclusions and keep, drumming up, further drumming up tensions as a result. What is the official line being taken by the government of India? I think most of the responses from the government of India have been to say that these villages lie north of the line of actual control. They don't lie on the Indian side of the line of actual control. What is a fact is that in some pockets of Arunachal Pradesh, just as in Ladakh, the line of actual control between India and China is a little hazy. There is no understanding that has been reached about, the precise definition of the line. So in some places, China claims these areas which happen to be on the Indian side. This is apart from the territorial claim. I'm not talking of China's claim on Arunachal Pradesh or our claim in Aksai Chin. I'm not talking of that. I'm talking of along the international boundary in Arunachal Pradesh, which is more or less the line of actual control between India and China. There are certain little pockets, they're not big pockets, they're little pockets of territory where there is a difference of perception. So you'll find the Chinese coming into that area, we will say, you have transgressed, you have violated this. We may go into some other area near some border pass, the Chinese will say, why are you here? You have come into our territory. So this thing has gone on and on for a very long time. The second point I wanted to make is that China has improved its infrastructure considerably on the Tibet side of the border with Arunachal Pradesh. So roads are coming in very close to the border. They are improving their infrastructure. They're setting up electric power generation capacity, improving that. Their troops are present very close to these areas. So the fact is, yes, the Chinese have increased their activity considerably in these areas, and that is what the satellites are picking up. They're picking up the construction of a village. But to say that, without doubt, unambiguously, unequivocally, that these villages are in Arunachal Pradesh, I think you may be, jumping to very, very rapid conclusions without studying the nature of the problem and the intricacies of it. So it's very easy for, in the media, somebody to say, oh, this latitude, longitude that is showing up on the satellite maps is very much in Arunachal Pradesh. You must understand that in some areas, the boundary is very, very the line of actual control, which more or less corresponds to the boundary in Arunachal Pradesh, international boundary. In some pockets, there are these difficulties. Longju is one of these areas, you must have heard. And I know that now there's some report of some new village coming up in some other area, which is also in the past, also there have been some differences. So these need to be sorted out in a peaceful manner between the two sides. Unfortunately, the mechanisms for maintaining peace and tranquility and building confidence have broken down after Galwan, which is
Right.
unfortunate. But now the challenge is for the two sides to not to disturb the status quo, and secondly, to get down and make really hard efforts to improve these mechanisms for building peace and tranquility and restoring confidence. Where are the blind spots? Where are the gaps in understanding? How can we address them? How can we strengthen these understandings so that these events do not occur? But the fact is that the boundary, India-China boundary, has become live in the last 2-3 years. As I said, a lot of it has got to do with China's capacity that it has built up. The Chinese capacity has been built up in areas adjoining the border, and the infrastructure, the movement of people, and they've built railway lines, they've built highways, and they've essentially done a lot in that area that has brought them very, very close up to the border with Arunachal Pradesh.
So since you mentioned Galwan Valley, so how do we avoid such face-offs in the future?
Exactly what I said.
Hmm.
We have to have more precise definitions of each side's understanding of the line of actual control. And, we have to sit down, continue these discussions. They cannot be sorted out by further confrontation, further conflict, and, this hysteria in the public, creating a hysteria and drumming up, this kind of it's like, the tempo of public opinion, to be raised to such a level without understanding the intricacies of
Core
the
issue, right?
core issues have to be understood.
Exactly. And Army General recently said that border incidents between India and China will continue to occur till a border agreement is reached between the two countries. So how close are we to reaching such an understanding or an agreement?
I won't be able to answer that question because I'm not in the government. You have to address that to the government. As I said, there are differences. China claims territory in Arunachal Pradesh. We claim our claim in Asachin, where the eastern boundary of Ladakh is. That is as shown in our maps. So there are territorial claims that have not yet been reconciled, have not yet been resolved. So we need very strong political will. We need a very clear sense of direction and understanding that such tensions, if they're allowed to build up and accelerate, it's of no use to either country, this kind of tension. So we must be very mature, very sensible, and very forward-looking in our resolve to solve these issues peacefully between the two countries. Because my view is that despite the competition and the what shall I say, the tensions, I won't say conflict, but tensions between India and China at this time, despite all that, fundamentally, there is no real contradiction between India and China as two civilization states who have lived side by side for many, it's not like between India and Pakistan, where there are, rivalries and differences and misunderstandings that go back from independence, from the time of independence and the creation of Pakistan. That's a very, very different, visceral kind of dispute. That's not the case with China. It's not, and neither of China's case with India. So fundamentally, I think China and India can craft a relationship that enables them to live side by side without tension. We may not be the best of friends. I'm not saying that we can be Hindi chini bye bye again, no. But we can learn to live with each other because there's no fundamental contradiction between our two countries, no fundamental contradiction. So that is really my approach.
Now, both the superpowers, US and China, are not favorably disposed towards India. And China has made Pakistan its colony, and even Bhutan has entered into an agreement with China on Doklam. So do you think India is in a vulnerable position now? And under such circumstances, what should India do?
Well, under these circumstances, as I said just now, we have to adopt a very sensible approach. We have to, of course, strengthen relations with partners like the United States and Japan, and but they are not going to come and fight our battles for us. We must understand that. Whatever China is doing in Pakistan, or what the recent understanding that may have been reached with Bhutan, I don't have details about it. So I wouldn't say the issue of Doklam has been resolved like you're saying. But the fact is that all this is happening around us, and I think we have to take stock of the situation, understand where our strengths and weaknesses lie, where are our vulnerabilities, and address that. Not only through internal strengthening of our capacity, but externally also forge the right relationships with other friends and partners, and at the same time keep the channel of communication open with China. That is not a sign of surrender. That is not a sign of being weak. It is not. It's a sign of our maturity, a sign of our ability to look ahead and understand that it is only we and we alone who can solve these problems. Nobody is going to take our coals out of the fire for us. We have to understand that. So drumming up this hysteria and this tension and this warmongering that goes on, saying that, we do this to the Chinese and that to the Chinese. So the army general who you quoted is very right in saying that until a border settlement is reached, these tensions are bound to escalate. And that is the view and the decision we must now take. Do you want these tensions to continue to escalate, or do you want to come both countries? China is equally, responsible, has equal stake in this. Both countries should have the political will to say we have to set aside these differences and come to some understanding that involves mutual respect, mutual sensitivity, and takes into account our mutual interests. So each side has interests, and when you negotiate, you obviously will not barter away your country's strategic interest. You would like to safeguard it, which is both cases that will be the approach, but you have to come to a view that some amount of accommodation is required between the two sides if you have to have a settlement.
Viewers, that was Nirupama Menon Rao talking about her new book, The Fractured Himalaya. Do go out and buy the book and read it to know why she refers to the Himalayas as fractured. So thank you for watching, and thank you, ma'am, once again from all of us at Indian Masterminds.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, ma'am.